The propagandist's purpose is to make one set of people forget that certain other sets of people are human. Everyone who wants to do good to the human race always ends in universal bullying. God isn't compatible with machinery and scientific medicine and universal happiness. You must make your choice. Our civilization has chosen machinery and medicine and happiness. Chastity, the most unnatural of all the sexual perversions. Cynical realism is the intelligent man's best excuse for doing nothing in an intolerable situation. So long as men worship the Caesars and Napoleons, Caesars and Napoleons will duly arise and make them miserable. Several excuses are always less convincing than one. All gods are homemade, and it is we who pull their strings, and so give them the power to pull ours. The finest works of art are precious, among other reasons, because they make it possible for us to know, if only imperfectly and for a little while, what it actually feels like to think subtly and feel nobly. It was one of those evenings when men feel that truth, goodness, and beauty are one. In the morning, when they commit their discovery to paper, when others read it written there, it looks wholly ridiculous. The vast majority of human beings dislike and even actually dread all notions with which they are not familiar. Hence it comes about that at their first appearance, innovators have generally been persecuted and always derided as fools and madmen. A man may be a pessimistic determinist before lunch and an optimistic believer in the will's freedom after it. Speed, it seems to me, provides the one genuinely modern pleasure. Speed provides the one genuinely modern pleasure. The charm of history and its enigmatic lesson consist in the fact that, from age to age, nothing changes and yet everything is completely different. That all men are equal is a proposition to which, at ordinary times, no sane human being has ever given his assent. Uncontrolled, the hunger and thirst after God may become an obstacle, cutting off the soul from what it desires. If a man would travel far along the mystic road, he must learn to desire God intensely, but in stillness, passively, and yet with all his heart and mind and strength. The impulse to cruelty is, in many people, almost as violent as the impulse to sexual love. Almost as violent and much more mischievous. Bondage is the life of personality, and for bondage the personal self will fight with tireless resourcefulness and the most stubborn cunning. Like every man of sense and good feeling, I abominate work. Man is an intelligence in servitude to his organs. Children are remarkable for their intelligence and ardor, for their curiosity, their intolerance of shams, the clarity and ruthlessness of their vision. Habit converts luxurious enjoyments into dull and daily necessities. The quality of moral behavior varies in inverse ratio to the number of human beings involved. From their experience or from the recorded experience of others, men learn only what their passions and their metaphysical prejudices allow them to learn. There is only one corner of the universe you can be certain of improving, and that's your own self. There are things known, and there are things unknown, and in between are the doors of perception. Maybe this world is another planet's hell. The more powerful and original a mind, the more it will incline towards the religion of solitude. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you mad. Experience teaches only the teachable. Most ignorance is vincible ignorance. We don't know because we don't want to know. To his dog, every man is Napoleon, hence the constant popularity of dogs. Every man who knows how to read has it in his power to magnify himself, to multiply the ways in which he exists, to make his life full, significant, and interesting. An unexciting truth may be eclipsed by a thrilling lie. People intoxicate themselves with work so they won't see how they really are. A fanatic is a man who consciously overcompensates a secret doubt. The most shocking fact about war is that its victims and its instruments are individual human beings, and that these individual beings are condemned by the monstrous conventions of politics to murder or be murdered in quarrels not their own. What is absurd and monstrous about war is that men who have no personal quarrels should be trained to murder one another in cold blood. It is a bit embarrassing to have been concerned with the human problem all one's life, and great is truth, but still greater from a practical point of view is silence about truth by simply not mentioning certain subjects. Totalitarian propagandists have influenced opinion much more effectively than they could have by the most eloquent denunciations. Great is truth, but still greater, from a practical point of view, is silence about truth by simply not mentioning certain subjects. Totalitarian propagandists have influenced opinion much more effectively than they could have by the most eloquent denunciations. There isn't any formula or method. You learn to love by loving, by paying attention and doing what one thereby discovers has to be done. The secret of genius is to carry the spirit of the child into old age, which means never losing your enthusiasm. That men do not learn very much from the lessons of history is the most important of all the lessons of history. Beauty is worse than wine. It intoxicates both the holder and beholder. To travel is to discover that everyone is wrong about other countries. An intellectual is a person who's found one thing that's more interesting than sex. Consistency is contrary to nature, contrary to life. The only completely consistent people are dead. The most valuable of all education is the ability to make yourself do the thing you have to do when it has to be done, whether you like it or not. The worst enemy of life, freedom, and the common decencies is total anarchy. Their second worst enemy is total efficiency. Perhaps it's good for one to suffer. Can an artist do anything if he's happy? Would he ever want to do anything? What is art, after all, but a protest against the horrible inclemency of life? There's only one corner of the universe you can be certain of improving, and that's your own self. I'm afraid of losing my obscurity. Genuineness only thrives in the dark. Like celery, hell isn't merely paved with good intentions. It's walled and roofed with them. Yes, and furnished too. My fate cannot be mastered. It can only be collaborated with, and thereby, to some extent, directed. Nor am I the captain of my soul. I am only its noisiest passenger. That all men are equal is a proposition to which, at ordinary times, no sane human being has ever given his assent. Man approaches the unattainable truth through a succession of errors. Idealism is the noble toga that political gentlemen drape over their will to power. After silence, that which comes nearest to expressing the inexpressible is music. Experience is not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you. Facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored. Dream in a pragmatic way. One of the great attractions of patriotism, it fulfills our worst wishes. In the person of our nation, we are able, vicariously, to bully and cheat. Bully and cheat, what's more, with a feeling that we are profoundly virtuous. Most human beings have an almost infinite capacity for taking things for granted. Sons have always a rebellious wish to be disillusioned by that which charmed their fathers. Happiness is a hard master, particularly other people's happiness. A childlike man is not a man whose development has been arrested. On the contrary, he is a man who has given himself a chance of continuing to develop long after most adults have muffled themselves in the cocoon of middle-aged habit and convention. A belief in hell and the knowledge that every ambition is doomed to frustration at the hands of a skeleton have never prevented the majority of human beings from behaving as though death were no more than an unfounded rumor. Every man's memory is his private literature. Science has explained nothing. The more we know, the more fantastic the world becomes, and the profounder the surrounding darkness. Men do not learn much from the lessons of history, and that is the most important of all the lessons of history. There's only one effectively redemptive sacrifice: the sacrifice of self-will to make room for the knowledge of God.